Okay, we have our panel on the international race for AI and the competitiveness of Europe. So, as you all know, AI is not a new technology. It dates back to the 40s and 50s in the last century. But most of the time, AI research was interesting, but it was not a very useful endeavor. That changed massively during the last years, and now we see this AI race we have today. We now have powerful AI tools, promise to accelerate research, to make business more efficient, and to enhance human cognitive abilities. The importance of AI has already been compared to the invention of the printing press or even to electricity. Now, we have this race we see today, which is dominated by the US and China. Europe trying to find its position and its way. And also this discussion is not new. Europe has already, so to say, made up its mind not only to have a competitive AI, but to have a certain kind of AI, namely an AI that is trustworthy and transparent, respectful of human rights and privacy, so to say, a good AI as a trademark of the European AI as compared to the Chinese and to the US model. But nowadays it seems that this strategy is not working that well. Less money is being invested in Europe, fewer patents are being granted, less significant models are developed in the UA as compared to China and the US, and the gap seems to be widening. So what can we do about that? How can Europe find its own path to this already predefined goal? And why is all of this important? These are the questions we want to address with this wonderful panel today. So let me first introduce our panelists. We have Morten Irgens. He's Vice Dean for Innovation and Impact at Copenhagen Business School and Strategic Advisor at Christiania University in Oslo. He's interested in the role of academia in making the future better and in its role of addressing our challenges we face today. He's also a co-founder of several AI associations. There's a long list of it, so let me mention only CLAIRE, the Confederation of Laboratories for Artificial Intelligence Research in Europe, which is an international non-profit association that aims to strengthen European excellence in AI with a focus on human-centered AI. Next to him, we have Alena Buyx. She's professor of ethics in medicine and health technologies and also director of the Institute for the History of Ethics and Medicine at the Technical University of Munich. She was a member of the German Ethics Council and served as its chair from 2020 to 2024. And during this time, the Ethics Council published a position paper on the challenges of artificial intelligence called Mensch und Maschine, Man and Machine. And since then, she has been a member of the federal government's Advisory Council on Health and Resilience. And then we have Susanne Beckers. She is an AI strategist at SAP in Walldorf in Germany. And being an AI strategist means that she advises and shapes SAP's AI strategy, which influences the development of new products and also of AI-driven tools used in the company. She is also responsible for government relations. That means when in some or the other government circles the question is coming up what the industry thinks about AI, then she is one of the persons to answer these questions. Yeah, so we have a great interdisciplinary and also intersectoral panel here. Thanks for all of you for being here. Yeah, and then let's start without much further ado into the discussion. I would like to start with a diagnosis of the situation and then come to the remedies. So maybe we start with the basics. Why should Europe run this race? Aren't we fine with ChatGPT and his relatives? Why not sit back and buy what the others developed? Who would like to start? You, Morten? Yeah, please.
Well, I heard that in the previous panel that the esteemed representative from Meta told us that Europeans should build applications on top of existing models which are Americans. I don't agree with that. I disagree deeply. And I disagree deeply because I don't believe this is necessarily a race in itself. I think it's about building critical infrastructure. Artificial intelligence is a transformative technology. And it's as important for us to develop the competence, both industrialized competence and research and science and innovation in these technologies as it was for us to create an electrical network across Europe 100 years ago. This is not about applications as much as it's about the future of us as a continent and as Europeans. Now, sovereignty, you can think of it as a pillar built with blocks, and you have strategic sovereignty on the top. We want to be strategic sovereign. We cannot be that as individual countries. We have to create a level of sovereignty in collaboration with trusted partners. For us, that is our European neighbors. But if we remove one of the blocks in the bottom, that pillar falls apart. And at the bottom, you have science, technology, innovation, economy, strategy, culture. Don't remove the bottom, because one more thing, this is, I'm going to draw in the air here a curve. It goes like this, and then it goes like that. This is the curve over the last 2,000 years of the number of people on the earth. And the big question is what happened there? Technology, science, what happened? The first industrial revolution, before the first industrial revolution, China and India were the richest, most wealthy and developed countries in the world. And then technology turned this around. And today, we have a situation where technology is a great redistributor of wealth, of welfare, and of might. And these days, and for the last 20 years, it's been away from Europe. So if we think about our children and grandchildren, we cannot say, oh, the train has left the platform. So we need to just do something else. It's not in the card, we cannot do that.
Can I jump on that, actually?
Yes.
Because I want to agree very much, and I love the expression of critical infrastructure. That's something that the Council has said as well. And that has two implications. I want to sort of follow on from what you've said. The one thing is a normative issue. So in the report, we looked at various areas of applications, and it differs. So that's important to say. But there are some areas in the digital platforms, the way we have discourse and online conversations, where we have almost monopolistic situations, right? Where there are only companies that are not based in Europe. And that is part of our critical digital infrastructure that is vital for our democracies, vital for our public discourse. So we said that's a huge issue. I couldn't agree more. So that's a normative implication. You need to have some control over that type of infrastructure if you want to make sure that the ideas that we have about, I don't know, the protection of human rights, all the kinds of ethical values that we actually subscribe to, the protection of our citizens is still built into that. So that's a big normative point. You've all heard that. But a second one sometimes falls by the wayside, and I think that becomes very practical when you look at my field, which is medicine. We can't buy all the stuff from China, or we can't have applications that have been trained on US data, or Israeli data for that matter, which is fantastic, right? We can't do that because for very practical medical reasons, because German patients differ. There is a different epidemiology, there are different genetic subtypes, all of that kind of stuff that plays a role in medicine and is important. So if you take AI applications, and obviously we're not talking about just chatbots built on generative AI, there the problem might not be that big. But if you really use the specialized things that we're currently starting to certify in medicine and rolling out in medicine, which is wonderful stuff, that needs to be to a certain degree homemade. So we absolutely, for that reason, for a very practical reason, must actually get into that race. And that is even without saying that there is a wonderful potential. So the third, if I may, just the third and last sentence is, of course, that there is great potential. And as a medic, I get super excited about AI in research, for example. I mean, if you look at what AlphaFold can do to protein structure develop, that's amazing. It cuts down on certain steps in the development of new medicines, new chemotherapy by years. Absolutely stunning. But again, I want that at least to a certain degree, and we can talk about all the technical detail in a minute, and there are people in the room who know that much better than me. We do want to have a hand on that. So we must be in the race.
So there are two clear votums to go into this race.
Yeah.
What is your position?
I would love to add on, right? And I would love also to differentiate between the small, precise expert models for a very specific purpose and the very broad general models called foundation models, and large language models are one part of these foundation models. And so also to be a bit provocative with respect to medicine, right? Last time, or I think all of us have the same proteins in, and there is a specific level of commonness between humans around the world where we can apply generic broad models, and some applications where you say, okay, German patients have a specific setup here and there, where then you need these specialized models. And with respect to the, for instance, large language models, we see every day coming 1 or 2 new large language models. So the question is, how much do we really want to invest into something that is not the latest tech tomorrow? And that means that we have to smartly think as Europe how together we can build something that will last longer and will be a benefit for the European economy. That can be large language models, but that can also be other types of foundation models. For instance, SAP is looking into business foundation models. How can we build foundation models on structured data, enabling businesses to run smoother, faster, with a broad application of AI?
So let me just add one question. So does it mean that the technological development is somehow making it easier for the European companies or for the European research? Large language models turn out to have more and more problems, and we see other technologies rising. We see the knowledge graphs, we see neurosymbolic systems, we see compound systems. So having good data becomes much more important than training these extremely large models. So does it become somewhat easier for Europe that we see this technological change from the large language models to the neurosymbolic or compound systems?
If I may?
Yeah.
Then if we share data, yes, I think, and that connected with me this morning when we had this freedom, or this 4+1 freedoms in terms of innovation and share research, share knowledge. Knowledge in technical terms can be data, and I know this is very critical, right? But we see large language models are trained on our communication, on what we think, what we have written down on statements. And sharing data can be done also in a compliant way, and that is something, compliance we are good at, right? So how can we bring this together and make sure that we get the right data, business data, or even medical data, but compliantly? That is a challenge, and that is also an area where we can apply innovation and be front runners to do that and to keep up with our brand of Europe being trustable, being reliable, being ethical with our data, and nevertheless have very cool research.
Yeah, but we can't do what we did in Germany with the GDPR if we want that. So I do want to emphasize that these things actually hang together, that we have strong data protection regulation for good reason, but the culture of using it and applying it has been very, very restrictive and very, I want to say, risk averse. And that's a euphemism. We've gone public with this. We've battled it out many times with other opinions in Germany. And so one thing that I'm a little worried about right now is that we will get the AI Act, which as such has many, many good features. You know, a risk-based model, not doing things with a broad brush, but actually having different areas of risk assessment and so on. Leaving the standards to the industries to develop partly, that's all a good idea. But the worry is, of course, that we will end up again with the opposite of what you've just described. And that's what I hear most. So when I sit on panels like this, the usual question is, Jesus, can't we do away with all this stuff? Because we're, you know, killing our innovation. And so my answer to that is, we need to use that as an enabler of responsible innovation. It's a no-brainer. Everybody working on data ethics has been saying this for pretty much decades, but it becomes very important right now. I think it's an absolutely critical time at this moment.
I think often when people criticize the regulations, particularly the ones that are coming from the Commission, there's about 100, I think, various acts on the digital domain. And if I say that, you know, there's a problem here, then I'm then I'm attacked for being against regulations. And I'm so tired of that. Of course, I'm not against regulations, but we have an approach in the previous panel. The discussion partially was about playing to not lose versus playing to win, and the willingness to take risk as companies, as individuals. But as societies, we don't take risk. We are over risk averse in our regulations, and we don't know anything about the future. We just assume, and then we create regulations that are very risk averse, and we end up with all of Europe being over compliant. And you know what happens then? It hinders innovation. So I don't think we found the right balance here. At least talk with companies, talk with innovators, talk with anybody who's trying to navigate this. And they reflect this as a nightmare, and we should take that seriously and not attack them for being against regulation.
So the brand of having a good IA in Europe is not in discussion, but the regulation has not yet found the right balance. From the perspective of SAP, how do you experience this regulation? Is it a hindrance? Or is it a kind of knowing at least where you have to go, what you have to obey to, and so that you know in which direction the development can go?
I would say it's nothing new in that sense. SAP has ethics standards for AI since 2018 already, where we make sure to operate in the best interest of the individual, right? To support humans with AI instead of supporting AI with humans. There's a big difference in that, being bias-free and so on. So we are already acting on that with Gen AI, but also with our classical narrow AI solutions we have built before. And so the setup of the EU AI Act is somehow bringing this into further shape, supporting, for instance, also governance bodies in companies which review AI use cases to check if they are compliant with the AI regulations. However, thinking about this and also now double-checking if we are compliant, doing test audits and all that, consumes, of course, a lot of effort. And there is then also the question, couldn't this effort be actually used to take it into innovation and spend that time and that brain power more on innovation instead of double, triple, and quadruple checking if we are really compliant?
Actually, it makes
Can I
not
say-
much sense to ask SAP about this. You should ask a small startup companies with
Yes.
3 or 5 or 15 people, because SAP have all the resources in the world to sit on all the committees, participate in the standardization committee, make sure that everything they do is compliant. And if push come to shove, they can stand up in court. But there's not that many who can do that.
So
Do you remember that I said we can't do what we did with the GDPR, where suddenly every little hairdresser was sort of terrified of data protection regulation, and the big players, of course, were able to do exactly what Morten just said. So I think what we should really, and it to some degree is built in the regulation, but there will be legal people in the room who will confirm that it is very difficult to differentiate the users of technology by their goal, which, however, from a societal point of view, is something that we must do. So my example is, we don't really care about AI in this one, right? I mean, all the apps that use it constantly, and we just click away, and there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of cookie policies, and I don't know what. Nobody cares. But in medical research, a medical researcher does a clinical study has to jump through so many hoops. So there is an imbalance of looking at what goal is the technology actually serving. And I appreciate how difficult it is to get that sort of into regulation, and that you need societal debate. What is actually important to us? And if you look at the foundation models, if you look at the large language models, ChatGPT sort of broke into the world, came from a very different region in the world, hoovered up pretty much everything that was freely available on the internet, and suddenly crashed into our world. And that, of course, is something that you can get to do when you start as a small startup, and then poof, you get funding that is out of the grasp of pretty much anybody in Europe. And it rolls over us as societies. And that's where the ethical stance comes from, where we say, can we just take a little moment and ask ourselves, is that something that we want to let happen that way? Are there alternatives to this kind of language model? Are there alternatives to that specific, or can we build alternatives? So what I don't like, and what happened a little bit initially, is that these things just happen and we say, well, now it's here. This shaping, this societal shaping, again, very difficult, but goal-oriented societal shaping, I think, is really, really, really important. And that could, for example, mean that you say that you, and as far as I remember, but I haven't looked at the final version, you have like a Erheblichkeitsschwelle, you have like the smaller ones have to do fewer things than the bigger ones, and there will be some differentiation. But it's difficult and very challenging to really build that into the regulation, and that's something that we must watch, because otherwise we will end up exactly with the same situation. The big players don't care, and the small ones are killed.
It's very interesting to discuss the difference between smaller designated models for science, for medicine, etc. But the large foundation models for society has arrived, and you cannot take them away from society. They are there. They are hoovered up data from the internet. 60% of all websites in the world are in English. 2.4% are in German. 0.2% are in Norwegian. Now,
you guys are lost.
We are lost, but Germans are lost too. Yeah. So the point here is that these language models, which are really, we are going to know to get advice for anything in the world, for anything in our lives, more and more as people start to use them. They are not. This is not about technology. This is not about economy. This is about culture. It's about norms, business norms, ethics, how we look at the world, the European way of life, and we are just. We have now succumbed to a foreign model of ethics model and how we will operate in society as humans, as neighbors, as friends, as employees. I think there is an argument here that it's time that we also get publicly owned excellent foundation models. They are now controlled by large American companies. It's absurd. This is a human genome moment. Mm-hmm. We cannot just leave it to commercial patenting and interests to run how we will look at the world tomorrow, to decide that. We have to make that decision ourselves. Yeah. Okay.
So
do you agree?
So we have these two positions of saying, okay, Europe should focus on smaller models, on application of models. We also heard from the last panel. And we have this position, you are advancing, Europe should also aim for own foundation models. So maybe could we turn to the question, what can we now do about all that? There's a lot of money already spent in a lot of initiatives in Europe. Also looking at the list of associations you founded or co-founded, why is it necessary that there are so many of these associations? And why does all this money which is spent on different AI initiatives in Europe since years, why does it not pay off? And what has to change?
Actually, we know that. Enrico Letti told us this. We have seen it in all the latest reports. We need to fix the single market. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you put into the system if the system is broken. Now, when I say that, it's also important to put money into a broken system because something will come out of it. And I do believe that when Ursula von der Leyen campaigned for her first period as president of the Commission, she said that technology sovereignty was a main policy strategy for her, and that AI was one of the pillars in that. And now, after her first year, after this Commission has been finished, what do we know? An enormous failure. Because if success would have been to reduce the distance to the Americans and the Chinese, we know we have failed. And why did we fail? Because we have spread the money thinly out all across Europe to tiny, small research groups here and there, with no interconnection and no common goal. So the reason the Americans have been so successful, they have concentrated talent, they have concentrated capital, they have gone for certain goals, and these goals have not been governmentally decided. It's been decided in other ways. And I think this is the way we need to go. I do believe that Europe needs a CERN for AI. You know that we have been through difficult times before. When all the particle physicists in the world were in the Soviet Union and in the United States, we established CERN. When space was foreign to us, it was all in the States and in Russia. We established the European Space Agency. We established Airbus. It's time that we take the bull by the horn and we say, you know, pushing money, spreading it thinly out through the Horizon program doesn't really work. Not for this purpose.
So more centralizing money and having a CERN for AI. How does it sound especially for you,
industry.
for industry?
Yeah.
How does it sound?
I wanted to add on what holds true for research here also holds true for industry, to bring this all together and have one central approach there from the European market. And then also have the interconnect between research and industry. I think we have really good research and we do a lot of effort to translate the research into industry. But really looking at what we are doing, for instance, with foundation models, where would we train them? We would train them at high performance computing instances somewhere in Europe. Let's be at Forschungszentrum Jülich, for instance, right? And then we have that model, but we do have no concept of how we would transfer this model into business application or into actually production development, and then once these models also need to be retrained. We do not have this connect between research, developing the model, deploying the model, and keeping it productive. We don't have the infrastructure for that, and we don't really have the processes to bring it from research to industry.
Can I just disagree a little bit?
I hope so.
Not with the larger points. I do agree with both of you. But we do have some successful examples of that kind of translation, not with foundation models, but I'm at the Technical University of Munich, and we have oh God. Now it doesn't come to my mind. Unternehmertum. Oh, Jesus.
Entrepreneurship.
Unternehmertum. So that's the name of the center.
Ah, okay.
Which is, I was thinking in English, and it's actually a German term. It's an incubator, and it works terrifically well. It's the biggest in Europe at this point. It sort of shoots 50 startups from the university every year, and it has plenty of unicorns at this point. Not foundation models again, but there is a 20-year expertise of sort of the pathway, how to facilitate that. So I just want to say, we do have examples, we do have ways to do that, we do have things to do that, but the other thing I want to not disagree on, just illustrate how big the problem is. The electricity necessary now for Microsoft's foundation model, they took over OpenAI, and they're training and training and training and training, is that of a middle-income country. The ecological footstep is devastating. So I think I want to come back to your very initial question. There is also, at least from an ethical point of view and from a societal point of view, there should be a moment to ask, do we really need to go that big? And that, I think, is the critical question, because I agree with you that we need our own foundation models. We do have Aleph Alpha, and then we have a couple of smaller ones, obviously, coming up. Do we want to go behemoth? It's an open question to my mind, because it has obviously some fairly problematic implications not to do that, and we've talked about them. Mm-hmm. But should we follow that imperative, and should we compete on that level? There is not a point against having this central agency. I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was all this talk about that one big AI center based in Paris, and it was going to be the next European Space Agency, and that didn't come to pass. So I absolutely agree that we need that, and that we need European foundation models. But I'm a little worried to copy or to follow in sort of that kind of path.
Yeah, I think that number one, three points. If I can remember the third, but
it's been a long day.
Yeah, number one is a CERN for AI. It's not about. It's in addition, not instead. We need all the distributed, fantastic research that is happening across. But we don't create the next economy that way, because and the reason for that is a failed single market. It doesn't work for creating large digital companies in Europe. So, but I do believe that what we saw with CERN was that particle physics research all across Europe increased because of that. Because people go there, they spend 3 months or 3 years, and they go back to their home countries and their home institutes, and it blossoms and blooms. So this is an instrument for lifting all of Europe. Number two, are we going to go in the right direction? Are we going to go in the same direction as the large American companies are spending so much energy on these models? And by the way, energy cost in Europe is 2 to 5 times higher than in the United States. So it doesn't, from an economical perspective, doesn't make any sense either. Well, there is a path forward. We cannot not try to go there, because if we don't try to go there, we are not finding out how to do it better. We need to do it better, both technologically, but also ecologically. And one issue here is it's how we use them. We use them to design cat videos and stuff like that, you know. And so we really need to find out
That's
our
the
own
goal
way.
question.
Yeah.
So let me, maybe before we open for the public for Q&A, let me add one final question. To have a European way in AI, that sounds a bit like a restriction. So I mean, developing scientific projects, that's an international endeavor anyway. And how could it look to, what could it mean to have a European way? That wouldn't mean that you are no longer inviting PhDs from the US to your institute. That wouldn't mean that as a company you will no longer hire people from other countries, from not European countries. So what would it mean anyway? That couldn't mean to close Europe in a way, to close European knowledge, not to stop exchange with other countries. So that also irritates me a bit about the focus, so to say, of the conference. How could it work? Or what would it mean for a company? You will not stop hire people from the US if
Pretty
they
sure
fit
not,
to your
no.
company.
So yes, like in building a good machine learning model, diversity is key, and that also holds true then for the people building that. Means we need experts all around the world, we need the greatest minds coming from the US, but also coming from Europe and even coming from China, right? Getting this all together. But then is the question, where is Europe actually already strong in, and how can we bring this together? Saying, on the one hand side, we had sustainability as a topic. We also had energy consumption in terms of sustainability, but also automobile industry. How can we leverage the knowledge there and then combine it with AI, with our AI innovations to make there a further step to be world leader in AI and automobile industry, world leader in AI, maybe also in luxury goods, right? So this key strengths Europe already has to even get the next step there.
Yes, thank you. 2 points. One is that closing down research like that would be the worst thing to do, of course, and that's how the US and other areas in the world are so successful, is they get the best minds from everywhere. I mean, we must keep doing that as well as we can. And Europe still is attractive to many, but it should be more. The second thing I want to say is just a wish, because I do believe that we should stick to our general European values that we have. I think that is the European idea. It's the European idea that we protect certain civil liberties, possibly stronger than in other areas of the world, that we have certain standards that are important to us. But we must be better on the practical side. So if I could make a wish, I would really like to have those kinds of institutions. And I think we have shown that we can enable the translation from some really excellent, heterogeneous and spread all over the place, agreed, but there is fantastic research there. It just needs to be leveraged. It needs to be scaled up. It needs to go down the translational route. And we can do that. So like an Unternehmertum, but big, like a European-wide Unternehmertum that helps people to navigate the pathways of regulation and just, pools the money that you need, just makes it easier to get good ideas actually built. And that doesn't exist as far as, even though the Commission says it does, but it doesn't. I completely agree. And I think that's something that we need.
I think what is European way? There is, if you try to define it, it's rather hard. But if you just make it easier for Europe to create Europe creates great science, but if you make it easier to create great companies, they will be born out of a European reality and a European culture. And for that matter, we know that diversity and plurality is a function of where you're coming from, where you stand, how you grew up, the society you live in. So by just doing that, that becomes the European way. We don't need to define it.
Great. Then with this comment, let's open to the public. So are there some questions? We have some time for questions. Yes, please.
Thank you. Hi, and thank you so much for a great panel discussion. I'm Ia Moden. I'm a lawyer coming from Sweden, and I am not a litigator. I'm working in collaborations, and I just have a comment. I think that we in Europe have a tendency of being risk avoidant to the level of having allowed the best to become the enemy of the good. So we are heavily over-regulating, and if we look back, I think that perhaps some 50 years ago, we used to have scientists running companies. We used to have engineers running companies. And to facilitate their endeavors, they would ask lawyers, they would ask them, what can we do to enable our businesses even more? And they will ask the finance sector, what can we do to finance our endeavors? And what I see now is a tendency to have companies instead being run by the finance management people instead of the engineers. And they ask the lawyers, what can we do to avoid risk? And it's a very different type of question. And I see my own sector, my colleagues, advising on risk minimizing instead of looking at how to enable businesses using the legal structure. And I think that we see this is also happening within the European Union. I have a background from Vinnova, the Swedish Agency for Innovation Systems, one of the funders of science and of collaboration with industry. And I saw then, 15 years back, how this was happening, how everything was spread out thin, so that no big differences actually were made. What are your comments on this? Thank you.
I need to come in on that. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say, which I find is absolutely fascinating, that the Scandinavians are saying these things when Germans point to the Scandinavians saying, look, they're doing it better. If you say the same thing, that really worries me, right? I mean, when we compare the way you do data protection with the German way, we do data protection, you guys are the model of... Anyway, the point... Yeah, absolutely. The point I want to make is very contentious. Usually, as an ethicist, you get accused of being the party pooper, right? The person who says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. That has not been the case for at least 20 years. Ethicists have mostly been the ones to say, we have lost all balance. Not doing things because we worry the risk can be deeply unethical, because the not doing is a decision as well and has implications just as the risks is a risk of itself. So ethics has for quite a while changed. I can't say ethics, I mean, it's a very broad church, you know what I mean. But there's a certain mainstream understanding of ethics that has really moved away from this, and I point the blame, wait for it, at the lawyers. Sorry, because it has been translated into regulation, it has sort of been drilled down into how do we, and the risk aversion comes from people in companies going to the lawyers saying, how can, and then the lawyers say, let's be very careful, let's do it the way we've always done, but a little stricter.
I'm afraid we can spend the rest of the afternoon with this question. Everyone wants to comment on that. You would add something very short.
Yeah, very short. I think that it's important to ask lawyers to be enablers. Yes. And if you ask lawyers, is there a risk here? It's their job to say, yes, there's a risk here. And if you ask in-house lawyers, you ask them, should we do this? They are measured on risk aversion. Their KPI is to say no. So, of course, they will say no, because it's their job. And what happens is that management says, okay, doing nothing is not possible, so let's just disregard what the lawyers are saying. That's the only way. It's binary. So either you do as the lawyers say and you don't do it, or the legal team says, or you go against their advice.
Okay.
And who advises the in-house lawyer? It's going to be the external lawyer having the same mandate. So that has to be changed.
The in-house
Yeah,
lawyer.
very-
There was
An interesting quote.
no. We take the person behind you. Yeah, there on the window you had on. There's a yeah. You are all very welcome to continue every discussion we start here via LinkedIn. So you have this little text everywhere on the tables where you can find the discussion, which is, of course, going on online.
So I'll try to keep it very short. My name is Karl and I'm a physician and early career researcher in Sweden. And as a researcher in medical field, I resonated deeply with the frustration over the data protection legislation, which is currently under review in Sweden specifically to try to look into the possibilities of liberalizing in some ways data legislation. But this is just one country. How do we move forward to actually having a coherence between different European countries on data protection legislation, because that is not currently a European competence, but it's something that is very much a European question.
So there was one third question. Who was the third one? You, okay.
Hi, Hanjo Hamann from Epstein University. I'm one of those party-pooping lawyers. I'm actually a legal scholar, and I do a bit of research on copyright law and AI. And I see, there's a problem with lawyers, I agree with you. But the other problem may be, politicians who are not, I don't know, how do I phrase this politely, who do not want to take a stance against or pro something. So we just had this, in the AI Act, there was a rule about, how, no, it's not actually the AI Act, it's the CDSM directive, whatever. There's a rule on how to prohibit companies from taking your content online. And the legislators said, just have a machine-readable declaration that you don't want this, and then it's all good. And now there's a lot of lawyers who think about what could machine-readable mean in that context. None of them have any technical background. And I just wonder to the panel, maybe you have some ideas, how do we improve the interface between law and technology? Because I see this as a problem of education. Like, I teach this at university, but my students will be there in like 20 years, so they come too late. Is there anything we can do quicker to educate lawyers in technology and vice versa to make technologists speak to lawyers effectively? Because that's, I see a big problem.
I'm going to jump on this one because I'm on the board of the Bucerius Law School here in lovely Hamburg. And that's a question that is discussed there quite a bit. First sentence, at least in Germany, the legal training hasn't changed for 150 years, I think, or 120. Too long, anyway. So, I mean, come on, guys. Get it done. That's the first thing to say. You might reform it at some point. And the second is, of course, you need really specialized training. We've done that in many other professions. The interdisciplinarity has increased in very many other professions, but actually the law has such a meta skill, which is so powerful, which is the problem. Nobody dares say no to the lawyer because they have that particular skill that nobody else has. So my final point to both of you, and actually to you as well, is we need people with broader shoulders again. So I advise a lot of politicians, and what I tell them is, well, change laws. Please, please, please do Normenharmonisierung, right? I mean, check out where it doesn't fit together and then maybe kick out some. It's not written in stone forever and ever. We're not changing the constitution immediately, but can we please at least go down sort of to the lower levels of our legal system and sort of Großreine machen? So there is a lot to be done. There is a lot to be said. And I think it would be fantastic. So that's my wish as somebody on the board of a law school. Please, if that came from the legal profession itself, that would really make a difference, because we're all terrified of you.
So I think that one of the things that was said is interesting, namely, going back in time, there were scientists and engineers running companies, but there were scientists and engineers running ministries. There were scientists and engineers running the commission, and now they're not. And we have professionalized the ministries, and we have professionalized the commission, and that's not good, because what you have done with this professionalization is that you have gotten a unified groupthink type of. They all come from the social science
legal
education
profession,
or legal
70%.
profession and they move into the ministries and they have the same way of thinking. And this is not good.
And maybe adding
Okay,
on to
so
what you
the
can do.
last statement is for you, otherwise we
Wonderful.
run the risk that you won't have time to get a cup of coffee before the next panel, so we cannot risk that.
What you can do in academia, you could also create a subject how lawyers can interact with, for instance, ChatGPT. Very fun fact, GPT-4 can pass the bar exam in the US, right? That should challenge your job. That really means think about how you can use this to the benefit of your function. I mean, me as a student, that would trigger me, like, I need to learn this and see how I can utilize that. That is the one part. And then also, in terms of lawyers and risks, I can tell you our CFO is our biggest fan because AI makes us run better. And our risk assessment is also looking into what happens if we do not invest in AI. And we have a great statement showing also other cultural perspective from one of our US players. Yes, we are looking into the risk of over-investing into GPUs, but far greater is the risk of under-investing, and that is their mindset.
So, thank you very much. We are running out of time. We already ran out of time. So, I think it's no surprise we didn't solve the problem here, but nevertheless, what I take from the discussion is that we at least found some hints, so there's no determinism, that some technology develops and we can only sit back and watch it developing. European AI should be more focused, maybe the funding should be more focused, there should be more connections of research and economy. European AI research should be more self-conscious, it should be more exciting, and then it maybe should work with obtaining this sovereignty. Thanks to the panelists, thanks to the audience, and please continue the discussion via LinkedIn. I'm sorry for all the propositions I had to interrupt here. Continue via LinkedIn, and thank you very much.